Hello and good morning and happy Tuesday here for Tuesday 10 at 10. My name is Richard Charpentier. I do apologize for Dr. Lynn Carson. She could not make it, so I will be answering your questions today. So it's only me. So we'll go get started. But remember, any questions, any help you might need, you can go on the Bakerpedia website. You can link it. I'm there as well. If you desire any R&D or product development help, you can hire me for the week to help you get from here to there. Product development, prototyping, anything like that, I'm there for you. So without further ado, Tuesday 10 at 10, first question. So on flour, so aging cake flour, what could I expect in final product performance? So now we're talking about, let's take a step back. Let's understand cake flour. What is cake flour? The definition of cake flour, also called I ratio cake flour, is a flour that is being used to help making cakes with high amounts of sugar. Usually I ratio stands for more than the flour, which is typically, the cakes and the Twinkie like batter, the high sugar content. But flour that is cake flour, the millers, what they do to help you make it I ratio, they chlorinate it. So technically it's being treated already with chlorine gas, and therefore it doesn't need, unlike bread flour, need to mature, put on the side for better performance. Because right here all we're trying to do is make cakes with it as defined by cake flour. So my recommendation is not necessary unless you get an all organic, never chlorinated, never bleached flour. At that point, think about what you're trying to do. You're trying to build some structure, you're not developing gluten. So no, cake flour does not need to be aged. Second question. Hello, when I make bakery mixes, it doesn't last long. It smells and tastes better. Please, what preservative can I use for my baking mixes? Example, cake mixes and donut mixes for commercial purposes to make it last longer. Thank you for your time. It's a good question. But in the first place, I would say, if you're trying to do your own mixes from scratch to create consistency, which I completely believe it's a great move, please do it for those who can, who are set up for it. If you're getting a smell and tasting better, usually mixes at a minimum, depending on the amount of fat and the amount of ingredients contained in your cake mixes or in your donut mixes, would last from 3 months to 6 months up to a year, based on, it all depends on the complexity and the number of overall ingredients. So my thought and my belief is, if you're getting a smell and it tastes better, go back and check the ingredients you're starting with. So with quality ingredients, we make quality products. So not saying it's not, but it's about rotating your ingredients and making sure you're using fresh ingredients all the time. Because as you put more than 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, sometimes 25 to 30 ingredients in the mix, we have to have all of the ingredients with the same shelf life. So when you do it, the recommendation is make sure that the shelf life of your baking powder, of your flour, what's the expiration date. And if another thing is, go ask commercial blenders. They would be able to do that. A lot of them work on 500 pounds minimum or 2,000 minimum based on the type of product. And they have the ability to really buy bulk and also fresh every day. So I would say, try it out. Next question. Hello, I'm a pastry chef from San Francisco, and I've been baking a lot of enriched bread loaves recently. I love to make an Asian milk bread, and my bread basically gets a really tall loaf and bakes very well, but as it cools, it starts shrinking down. It starts slight concave shape. And also, I've noticed that in bakeries and other bakers baking similar loaves, or Pullman loaf with the lid on top, where it starts shrinking inward a little. What causes it? So let's pause for a second. If you have a loaf of bread in the pan, think about what the temperature of the side walls of the pan and also the internal temperature. In order to be baked, you have to be above 200 degrees. That's a given. So some people can be 208, too close to 210. I would not recommend it. But if you think, what is steam? Steam is water at 212 degrees. So where you're reaching out that level where the bread is, there's a term in the French baking language, it's called reçuage, and what it means letting the bread cool after the oven and to allow the bread for all of the moisture entrapped still in the bread to get out. So right now, if you have a bread outside of the oven in a pan, where is the moisture going to? Nowhere. So it stays there, and it's basically starting making your sidewall that you've worked hard to make sure it is set and all structure and baked. Now you're bringing moisture, and if you put moisture on a nicely baked and dried sidewall, that's going to start collapsing. So recommendation, and I've always done in bakeries, depan right away. Depan right away. The longer it sits there, the more humidity, the more mold issues you can get. So if you can do it, I've done it. Use safety. Take some big gloves all up to the elbows and make sure it's being done right away, because the longer it sits there, the more moisture builds around the side. So that's a big thing for bakers here. Next question. I'm opening a small bakery to just make breads. How do I apply to get the necessary paperwork to make sure my workspace is legal? Please, thank you for your help. So here's the thing is, right now, it's difficult for me to really answer that question, because not knowing what state you're in, what county you're in, all rules and regulations for businesses vary from state to state and counties to counties. So what I would say, go check with your small business administration group. I'm sure you have one in the county or the biggest town. They have small business administrations to help, small businesses. And go ask, what do I need to open a business in my state and in my county? And what permit, do I need to be able to sell bread to customers every day? Assuming that's, it's for a retail space. Next question. Cream. Why is my cream separating with water after mixing? So it's a very short question. So I would say, why it separates? So let's think for a second. And again, assuming there's not a lot of information here to go with. If we're talking about cream, how do we make a cream? We're assuming it's a cream, fat-based cream filling and sugar. But if you're bringing fat with water, water and oil doesn't work unless you start building it up with emulsifiers to make sure, it's a good emulsification, either oil and water or water and oil. But for here, not knowing, it's difficult. The other thing, from practical experience as well, making the French or Italian or Swiss type of buttercreams. And I remember, if the temperature of my ingredients was not the same, then I would create separation, and it gets frustrating because you can see it starts like curdling. And if it's that, I would say make sure all the ingredients you will be adding to make your batter or make eggs with sugar, make sure they tempered at room temperature. It really helps out. You don't want to bring something super cold with something too hot, and it would create separation. But very good question. Next question. I am currently baking a bread formula that we have developed using psyllium husk, golden flax, egg white as a base. I'm using baking powder as a rising agent, and the result as far as texture and flavor are excellent, except for the typical baking powder aftertaste. Does anyone have any suggestion on how I can neutralize or reduce the baking powder aftertaste? And it says the aftertaste taste is typically that sensation of persistent dryness on the back of the teeth. Many thanks. Well, I would say if you can really taste it, I've been in the bakery industry making cakes and breads and for over 33 years. I'm not sensitive to what you're describing where I get that dryness on the back of my teeth, but you might be a super taster be able to detect slight different flavors coming from the baking powder, and again that could be possible. But knowing, you put it in something, you say using flax. Let's remember flax as that oily, fishy note. So could it be from it? And one thing as a recommendation, before you start neutralizing anything, go check the pH. Check the pH of your finished batter and basically and see where you stand. Because you could also be getting the bitterness because your pH is very low, or you could also be alkaline, which will get you different sensations on the tongue. So check your pH and then adjust accordingly. Remember, 7 is neutral. It's a scale from 0 all the way to 14, 14 being super alkaline, and basically below 1 is super acidic. For example, lemon juice is right around 3.2, 3.5. And if you make a devil's chocolate cake, it's around 8.5, 9. So that gives you, sort of what you would get when you taste it. So adjust accordingly, but technically you should not get a aftertaste, but you might be sensitive to it. Good question. Last question, another leavening question. So it reads, "Hi, I'm using I need more information. I'm using baking soda, SAP, which is sodium acid pyrophosphate, and the acronym is SAPP. I'm sure you have it, sodium acid pyrophosphate, and not to be confused with sodium aluminum pyrophosphate, which is SALP, which they're different leavening acid. They serve similar purposes, but with different functionalities. So question is using baking soda, SAP, sodium acid pyrophosphate, plus the water when you mix it, and equal CO2 with gases released during the baking process. Basically the person, I'm reading the question, which chemicals are being produced from this reaction? Thank you in advance. Well, we were just talking about, baking powder right earlier, giving a off flavor. Right now, you're using basically a single acid. Baking powder tend to contain two, but a lot of people choose to make their own, basically a base and an acid, and you can control your rate of reaction and when you want your product to rise in the oven. But right now, most likely, as a sodium base, you will come out with phosphoric acid. And in the scale, you have residual, there's more complex, it's not just black and white and where you get, from sodium acid pyrophosphate, and then you end up with just phosphoric acid and sodium. There are some other compounds, it's a food chemistry is a bit complex. And right now you're getting phosphoric acid. But one thing to know also, when you're using SAP is known as to be the most better aftertaste overall. So, relating to the question from earlier about that could be also using too much sap in your baking powder or maybe sensitive to sap, but that's what you're getting. And the slightly bitter aftertaste is usually coming from sap. So that wraps it all. We covered all the questions for today, Tuesday, 10 and 10. So and again, any questions, any help necessary, we're here for you. Go on bakerpedia.com, look it up. We're there to answer either through the forum or also if you need consulting help, we're here and available to help. So thank you and have a great day. Bye.